Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. There is a concept that comes to us from the ancient world, from the archaic. It is before the idea of portals in the mainstream. It is before the idea of parallel dimensions. It was the idea that reality has veils. For a modern audience, these veils, I am calling them curtains, because in the Sufi tradition, the veil, it's a similar word. Now, what were these veils? What was the nature of the human being? What was the depth of the realm that the human being walked in? What was the mystery of consciousness? Was there an individual intelligent cause or a non-individual intelligent cause? Many questions come to the human being. I can say personally from my experience in my youth, my inner realms I felt were a bit faster, of course, arrogantly. Arrogantly, I felt I knew. I felt I knew the world. It took me a while to realize I don't know anything. But that was the greatest moment. That moment when I realized I don't know, there was as if something possible. It was as if there was space in my eyes for the new. That's the power of the unknown. Human beings, I find, we engage, we interact. Our engagements are not just objective oriented, even though we arise, our individuality is based on our bodies. But there are moments in life where it is not worth to express the inner realm, where a victory is not a victory, it is the defeat of what you could not see. I believe it was last year, I had a very profound experience. I found myself in a unique state of mind. And in that unique state of mind, I had a question from the unknown. And the question I had from the unknown was, what was the next phase? What was the next phase? You don't know how many moments of my life have gone out towards this question. What is the next? What is the next? What is the next? And I remember I had a sort of intellectual desire to try to comprehend linearly what man needs to do. And in that unique state of mind, the Logos gave me an answer. Gave me an answer that I remember when I was writing it down. It was a moment where the soul was smiling, but the mind was breaking. In that experience, I went with the question, what is civilization's next step? The answer that the Logos shared with me was that it is not a process of calculation, it is how emotional stability is greater than intellectual precision. That man has made sophisticated tools, but who is the one using it? And who are you using the tools for? The greatest question that all warriors must ask: for whom have you held the sword? For whom have you held your weapon? For whom have you gazed into this world? Because there is a relationship of idea and ideology where it's the elegance of language. There is a freedom I feel I have found behind my eyes where the freedom cannot be limited to a thought. It's as if there is a space where all thoughts happen. If the human being realizes that space is inseparable from their presence, they can happen before any thought does. There's an attention there. There has been moments in my life where I could have been decent, but the ego wanted its victory. The identity didn't want to change, and so it was willing to let the emotional realms of people change. You know? There's times I think every human being looks at the sky and wonders if their life has been enough. If their effort has been enough. If their attention to the release of wrath behind their eyes has been enough. You know, there was a time where I remember I got so angry where it was as if I felt the universe was shouting at me. I don't know if people have experienced this sort of moment, but it's a moment where you feel your soul took the wrong step, not your mind. It's not linear. It's just an emotional feeling that something was disturbed. And that is the biggest issue. You know, there was a time I was thinking, why is it that there is so much heavy karma for so many people on this planet? And I was like, why? Why should that karma be? And then I thought, could it be that man is being rude to nature first? Could it be that man is being blind to the intelligence of the world first? And then he's wondering why the world is not aware of it? Do you know, it's as if like the thoughts in your mind suddenly one day noticing they are conscious, becoming conscious, and shouting in the pitch black abyss of that space, in the back of whose mind am I walking? You know? The rage of the titan, wondering why it is shackled. You know, the rage of the guilty. You know, there's a type of psychology, I've noticed it sometimes in myself, sometimes I've noticed it in others. It's the identity where the person feels they are being pushed, but they are not being hit. It is identity. So much of this life is identity games. It's ridiculous. Your decisions are identifications, are they not? Who can make a decision without an identification? The main calling of this episode is that whoever's listening, decency surpasses calculation. It is the heart's calculation. It's something that the days I ignore, the symphony of my decency is the day I could tell you, like, don't think I'm just talking about stuff and there's freedom. There is freedom, of course, for any being. It's as a potential, but its activation, it depends on the activity and the behavior of the person. There is a sort of stoic algorithm to life, but it's not per se even stoic. It is not even you gotta behave in one way and you're gonna succeed. It's life sensitivity. That means if there is a bird beside your water bottle or something, like I remember seeing a YouTube video, there was a bird beside this guy's water bottle and he just opens it and pours the water on the cap and leaves it, and the bird comes and drinks. You know? I'm not joking. I saw this video on YouTube. This whale brought this girl's phone back from the ocean. Like her phone fell into the ocean and somehow this whale caught it and brought it back. You know? I don't even know how a whale can do that. But I saw the video. It was one of those white-headed whales. You know? So you see, there is a decency to life that is not based on the identification with the contents of the moment. It is how the moment happens. It's just how it goes forth. You know what that means is, like, it's like hearing your young cousin say something to you, and your young cousin is saying it with a serious intensity or something, you know, and it's admirable, but at the same time, imagine what they're saying is wrong. You know, so instantly in that moment, you could be like, you're wrong or something, or the person can ask a question, or at least honor them for the effort that was worth it. You know, there are teachers who they only teach the strong. There are teachers who can only teach the weak. And then there are teachers who teach the student that sees beyond the teacher. There is always a factor to precision in this realm, that it's not a singular dimensional phenomena. There has been moments in this life I've noticed certain events, certain ways my moment take place, certain things I've seen, and it's as if you feel we are in the jurisdiction of the emotions of the universe. Of course, it is always way easier to speak than actually experience. But time fixes everything. Time is you know what it is? Time is not like a master that everybody is like a slave to. Time is the greatest servant of man. It is the tool we extracted from the void that revolutionized uh, existence and communication. You know, somebody once said, before I tell you the story, somebody once said, meditation is listening to the nature of the world, and prayer is speaking to it. And oftentimes I have wondered why a human being should pray. Me personally, in my life, there's been many moments where I felt like this mindless leaf being pushed by the wind. And in those moments, my prayer was just for clarity. That is the prayer of all prayers. Trust is how the mind breathes. And a human being cannot be decent. They cannot be who they are if they don't trust the moment. That is the dissension of morality, the distrust of the only world you're in, once in this way. Aldous Huxley has a quote where he says, "There are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception." And there is a French philosopher named Albert Camus. And Albert Camus, he has this saying where he says, sometimes when you go, a genius idea might strike you when you're just going through a revolving door. Can you imagine that? You're going through one of those revolving mall doors, and suddenly in the middle of that door, genius strikes. You know, it's funny. In mythology, there is the idea of the beast. That there are two beasts, not two, but there's the concept of the one notion of the archetype of the manifestation of chaos at its extreme, and then the archetype of just pretty much how the human creature was beastly. We were beasts. You see Beauty and the Beast? I don't know. I think many people missed the point of that Disney show. I saw it as a kid, Beauty and the Beast. I didn't understand this then, but like when I look at it now, it's very clear. It was as if the gentleness of the world tamed the beast. The civilized man has to be tamed by gentleness. Sorry, the beast, the bewildered beastly man. You know, the human being who feels their energy cannot be contained. That means every person is energy. When I see an angry person, that's kind of like someone looking. It's like you looking at another pilot who's not, who their plane of existence is turbulent. There is something I call the pilot's honor, and it's honoring rhythms in nature by being them. The doors of perception between the known and the unknown. If we were to see it as revolving doors, we are oscillating between the known and the unknown. Therefore, if we cannot become conscious that we're oscillating between the known and the unknown, there is no need to search the unknown or even go towards metaphysics when you cannot discriminate between the dimensions of one's being. You know? You know, Buddha had this thing called the silent sermon. I never told you the story, but I'll get to it, guys, don't worry. Buddha had this silent sermon. In the silent sermon, Buddha held a flower, and he sat in the center of society, and all his disciples sat in front of him, and they all closed their eyes, all trying to meditate intensely, all trying to be the statue of truth in front of Buddha. And Buddha held a flower and smiled and just stared at the flower, as if beauty is a silent teaching. And none of the disciples got it, as legend has it, except this one old dude who was passing by, and he just sees Buddha and he smiles. And people say like he's the only one who heard Buddha's silent sermon. What he meant was what Buddha was doing was showing those people gentleness. The ancient Greeks say, to tame the savageness of man and make gentler the life of this world. If you as a human being are not becoming gentler as the days are going by, you are keeping the life of this world wild. And this doesn't mean intensity is savageness. You can be intense, but in a very organized way. You know, watch the movie Gladiator and you'll understand that. You know, but you can be also intense with chaos. And anytime my hand has dared touch chaos, let me tell you what happens. You could even be so blessed to have other beings come and take your karma. I'm speaking from a theosophical angle here, so I'm going to permit the potential for speech like this. So whoever's listening, as Aristotle says, is a sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. So as you hear me speak, entertain. Do not, everybody who's listening to me, just, I'm trying to paint a picture. If you stare at the brush, you miss the picture. From a theosophical angle, to create the why we are going to this perspective is because we can see human beings, they look at each other. When you look at someone else, they appear as an object. When you look at yourself, if you were to close your eyes, at most your identity is a subject. So man, when he opens his eyes, gets access to the objective. When man closes his eyes, whether his eyes are closed or open, actually doesn't matter. You have access to the subjective realms, the inner realms, as I say. Now the situation is, from a theosophical, when I say theosophy, again, I'm talking about communication with beings beyond the veil, because in this talk there is the concept of the curtain. I have to share this. The theosophical angle is this: that human beings, they could go and become friends with their neighbor. Now they wondered if there were friends in neighboring dimensions, or they wondered that maybe they did not belong here. Many ancient mystical practices, the teaching is as if the guru is looking at the disciple and saying, "You were never from here." So you cannot suffer from what's here. So from a theosophical angle, if there was a being in another dimension, and if there was communication with that being, we tend to see it through the landscape of our objectivity, but I feel the higher dimensions do not speak the language of logic. That energy arises to itself in ways where it has never linearized before. There are some things that people may not understand at first, only to realize that the way you understand it is by experiencing it. I'll give you an example, like a keg stand. You know, there was a time in my life where I experienced, like, a keg stand, you know. And even though at some point I just couldn't drink enough, so it was like the beer was being wasted, but still the experience was fun, you know. And there was a possibility of the reverse angle, pretty much. The story I wanted to say earlier, but then I kept going on a tangent, was the story of, let me see, what was the name? What was the name of the story? Sorry guys, I'm just trying to remember the story. Words, find me now. I don't know, guys. Maybe the story's orbiting around me poetically. Pretty much the idea is that after we have studied the objective realm, after we have looked at the objective realm properly, we will in some sense be interested by that which is behind the scenes, behind the skin of the visible realm. You see, back in the day, for example, when it was windy, they thought it was spirits and it would freak them out and they would go indoors, for example. You know, they didn't like the wind. They thought it was something, you know, some spirit passing by or something. You know, they had a primitive understanding. And then as time went on, as we gained more experiences with the phenomena, it managed to change the definition of the phenomena. So it is important to realize that in life, as you experience your definitions, their texture changes. So when it comes to the inner realms, there is a question where the person is debating, is this, like from a Jungian standpoint, is this from the autonomous, you know, unconscious? Is that means that when the person sees, for example, I don't know, like in the New Age community, there are certain people who they feel they've had a sort of telepathic communication with an extraterrestrial. You know, there's people like that in the world. And so I wondered, how do we know it's true? How do we know it's false? And the question was exciting to me. The question had to do with the sensitivity of the trust of the mind. So if you have trusted your definition based on a condition, anytime that situation changes, the circumstances changes, your definition changes. So if you live as a conditional being on this planet, you have to endlessly update. If you live as a thought, as an identity, you have to endless update. And you have to endlessly, if I can say, validify. You know? You have to constantly compare more than one world. That means certainty about the present seems to do with an assurance from the past. It's like the person's looking at where is the warranty for their object they bought, for their device they bought, and then suddenly they remember, oh yeah, it's in the past. You know, it's somewhere, somewhere in the void of where the world took that object. If there is 0.000 whatever amount of zeros you want, 1% chance that the mind is a part of a field, this means change is not death. Change is how infinity appears. You know, it's the kiss of the void upon the infinite face. Or the infinite kiss on the tears of the void. The notion that all the classifications, category, multidimensional ways reality has been split up, the kaleidoscope of psychological disposition that the human finds themselves staring into. There's, like I'm telling you, there is a hall of mirrors where you actually go into, like, I don't know, a festival, and you go into, like, you pay the ticket and go into the hall of mirrors. And then there's the hall of mirrors, which is how every object and phenomena you see is reflecting your nature, your inner nature. And this concept might be strange, because the concept of inside is the notion of somewhere we can see. But what if there is a way of going within or going inside that has nothing to do with the boundaries of space and time? As if space and time was doing its own thing, and there was something watching, silently watching in every moment of noise, something observing through the stillness in every movement of the world. I feel we are imbued with the spirit of the memory of the planet, which means we are that rare creature in nature that not only became aware its particles, not only became aware that its particles projecting a mind, now is beginning to realize the mind was there before the particles could move. That means it's like there was a moment in my life where I threw a leaf into a river. In my childhood, I was blessed to, play around in nature a lot. There's a story of this woman who worked on a rice field. This woman who her whole life she had worked on a rice field, and her daughter was watching her, and she had worked on a rice field so much her back was bent. Her back was bent, like her job required her to bend down every day, so her spine was more bent than straight. And so there's a moment where it's dinner time, and the daughter of the mother is there, and the mother is there like after a day's work, with rice ready at the dinner table, and there is a grain of rice that falls. A single grain of rice that falls from the spoon of like the girl, the daughter. The moment the grain of rice falls, the mother picks it up and says, "My breath is in that grain of rice." That means it's like everything takes life to give life. There was a significance of the event and the investment in the event. There's a story from this Sufi mystic named Hafez. I feel it's relevant. One night, this is in Hafez's poetry book, I forget the name of it, which is strange, I usually don't, but anyways, in this poetry work of Hafez, Divan Hafez, Hafez is with his disciple. He's a Sufi, and the Sufis had a unique esoteric tradition at the time. You can say mystical tradition of their own eyes. And thank God. Okay, that's blessed. Guys, that was a close crash. I don't know if people heard it. I can't see it, but the sound of it was like visual. Hafez is with his disciple. He's in this meditation or something. And in his vision, he gets this vision, and in this poetry, he says, from the eyes of his heart. That means whoever is interested in esotericism, mysticism, metaphysics, you have to open the eyes of your heart first. You got to realize you. You got to realize the simplest dimensions to your being and the most complex potential experiences. It's all a spectrum, you know. So Hafez, in his vision, this Sufi mystic from 700 years ago in Iran, he gets this in Persia. He gets this view of this slave. Back in the day, 700 years ago, there were slaves, and so what happens is he gets a vision in his heart, like from the eyes of his heart. He says in his poetry that there is a slave in a cave who's ran away from the cruel masters, and the cruel masters are coming to find him. They're coming to catch him, and Hafez sees this, and Hafez instantly commands his disciple to go and get this person. Do you know? Go and get this person before the cruel masters come back. As if from the eyes of his heart, Hafez has seen even further in the event. The world has allowed him to see further in the event. Because the divine dwells where there's decency. And any person can say, I have seen this way too much for it not to appear as a fact for me. So of course, and you can entertain the idea. What happens is Hafez looks at his disciple and he says, he exactly gives a strange location of the cave, and he says, you go up this and you go right, and there you go to the far end and there's a cave, and you instantly have to go save this guy before the cruel masters arrive. And so there's this situation, and his disciple is like this warrior mentality or something. So the disciple is like a strong character. And right before the disciple leaves, Hafez suddenly, as if his inner realms are telling him to say one last thing to his disciple, he says, before you go and get this slave, when you go to get this slave, save this slave's life from the cruel masters before the cruel masters come and get him from the cave, you have to, you can't say a single word to him. You have to be completely silent, as if you have taken a vow. And so the disciple has seen enough from Hafez to trust him, and it's the strange moment. It's the event of it's like how the soul of the moment is moving. And so the disciple trusts and goes. He gets on his horse and quickly, just at incredible speed. Maybe not that fast, but you know. He just goes there, He suddenly notices the cruel masters searching, and he gets a sign that maybe the place is right. But he runs faster with his horse. He's solo, the disciple, and he goes. And he goes to exactly the location Hafez said, even the detour or whatever. And so the guy goes exactly there, and he sees the slave is there. Now he's smiling because he's like, yes, we have time to save him before those guys come, and instead it's going to become a battle or something, So in that moment, the disciple goes in there and he's about to say, come on, man, I'm going to save you. He sees he can't. Hafez told him, you can't say anything. And he just sees that the slave in the cave, doesn't know who this person is. He thinks it's the cruel masters who've come to take him back. And so the slave's shouting, God help me, please, do something, something very, from a religious context. The guy's just shouting to God help me, God help me. Little does he know he's being helped. And so the guy sees there isn't enough time before the cruel masters arrives, and he ties the guy's hands quickly with a rope and connects it to the horse and quickly goes, and the guy's just shouting, no, please don't take me back. The guy is in such a frenzy, the slave, he can't even tell they're going a different direction, but he's just in a fear, hysteria. And so as they are going, the disciple is galloping on this horse, and the guy's coming behind them, Of course not galloping, just going, And the disciple is silent, looking at the moonlight in the dunes and just crying. This grown man, this soul, just letting it all out, crying. And why was he crying? Because he understood why Hafez had told the disciple that you can't tell anything to him. Because the moral of the story, as Hafez says in his poetry, was that sometimes in life you think you're in hell, but you're just getting close to heaven. You're about to be in heaven. It is the notion of not the endurance of a morality that a book has to tell you how to be a human being. You know, human beings, it's like we cannot, we should realize the value of our eyes. And without freedom, it's impossible. Without trying to recognize that we are citizens of the cosmopolites, as Diogenes says, this Greek philosopher, you're not a person of a nation, you're in a universe. And in one verse, names cannot take away lifetimes. You know, I'm honestly in a love and hate relationship with language. I love it when you consciously use it as an advanced technology. I hate it when there is ideological possession. Ideological possession means the person feels they don't have a permission to behave beyond a certain idea. That means for me, it's like if you care for the world, then that way you've cared for yourself and others. Like the Dalai Lama was smart, guys. The Dalai Lama, he's like, show compassion to the world, that's it. And sometimes I feel like, there were these old school strip thermometers. I remember when I was a kid and I had a fever, my mother would put these strip thermometers on my forehead, and it would just turn a certain color. Sometimes I feel when I speak, or when I communicate, or when language is expressed, it's changing color. It's like Marcus Aurelius has a quote where he says, "The soul is dyed with the colors of its thoughts." Dyed in the sense of like pigment coloration. It's a technique, old school technique that we use, not like dyeing. Dyed in the colors of its thoughts. The soul is dyed in the colors of its thoughts. That means you're like a glass orb going into the different colored surfaces and suddenly having projections of identity. Decency is the secret. Decency is even more important than honesty, because some people may ideologically be in conditions where they feel they're honest. Because if you think about it, if the person only meditates and then accesses a certain state, then what's the point? What's the point of not realizing the unconditional? That's the beauty, that's the advancement we're seeking. That's like what we're even seeing happen. The fact that labor jobs in the future are going to be automated and businessmen are going to be like, sure, robots can work 24/7 without unions and complaints. Why should I hire employees? This can totally happen in the future. And so when that happens, it's as if the labor we used to do became automated. I feel what it is there's a view where you evolve into a greater dimension, and there's a view where you are just passing down the work. It's as if like this world can be seen strangely as a doorway. That means it may shock us that what feels like 100 years of life poetically may actually be an instant of awareness. It's the dance of the space of the mind with the body of matter. And so much of life is just movement and noise, like sound. Like right now, somebody could hear me, and if they don't, Somebody can hear me, and if they don't see, if they can't speak English, it's as if they'll be like, why is this guy singing a song, or something like. It has to do with the sound. So I'm saying that on some level, it's just phenomena, regardless of our interpretation. And then there is our interpretation, which is the personal dimensions of your life as a human being. And then there are the impersonal. And I'm just suggesting that once you work with your personal life, once you are content with yourself, then you'll start your work, your great work in this plane of existence. That means I've kind of made it alive in my science fiction novels, but it's this idea that every human being, if they ask him in the future, what's your work? Their answer is the great work. And this has no connotation or to alchemy or anything. It's just the idea of the greatest work. That means we are energy, correct? We're energy that can be directed, correct? Then how are we directing this energy? What caliber, I do understand that there is this notion that, okay, gods are woo-woo to the atheist, and it's freaking them out, the fact that there's this notion of gods. But what is greatness? When we look at great leaders in the past, it's as if we make statues of them. Do you know why is that? It's because they stand with us. They set the bar high. When they set the bar high, they get remembered because they attempted the new. And so when somebody asks you in this sci-fi setting, not even sci-fi, I just hope this happens one day, where it's as if they ask the person, what's your work? And he's like, the great work. Again, I'm repeating this simply because the greatness of it is the effort of your whole lifetime in every moment. Like this thing about the great work, I wrote a book on it, believe it. And I feel the greatest work won't activate. That means you won't experience your true karma unless you're honest. And honest means you don't fear complexity because you're comfortable with the simple. I would say this. That any person, when you look at knowledge and everything, it's like you can completely see it in a simplified way. One of my uncles once told me, in an emergency, take a step back and then look at the situation and engage. That means in the initial impact, your senses are cluttered. But if you just take a step back from any situation and just look at the situation and see what's happening, then the mind is its own roar. Alan Watts, the great Alan Watts, he has this thing in one of his talks where he says, if two spheres are spinning around one another, which one is spinning around which in a vacuum? That means when planets orbit around each other in empty space, it's as if where is the center of empty space? It's as if, I don't know if people know, our sun is orbiting around something too. And that thing is also something else. It's orbiting around something else. There is a vastness to the cosmos. Think of how microscopic we went. Just think about it. Think about right now, it was reduced by Brian Greene. I think it was Brian Greene. Like string theory, it was like, what do you call it? Like they saw reality and only as these vibrational strings, but only possible to explain if there were 10 dimensions. Mathematics is incredible too, guys. I'm telling you, mathematics is definitely a language. That means there can be mathematical poetry.
So guys, I'm gonna relocate. I'll be back. So hang in there. And as Sri Ramana Maharshi says, silence is also conversation. So I'll be back, guys.
Okay, guys, I'm back. Decency, emotional stability is necessary to handle. I feel love, mystically speaking, love is one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is efficient design. It's honor. Honor means you live for the potential. You stay true to the potential of your being. Because I use this metaphor often that I say we're candles. Seriously. We're just candles in a more complex form. Our body, the candle wax is biological, you know, and the candle flame is consciousness. And the universe is like this dark room where we're seeing as far as this candle illuminates the room. Now, decency reduces the candle flame. The absence of decency reduces the candle flame. And decency means that there was an urge to naturally be, but due to a certain, we can say, sub framework of meaning, the person can't act natural. That means it's as if I have seen. Here's the thing: there's something known as outer strength, and there's something known as inner strength. And so outer strength is how tough the person was when there was changes in the physical manner, but the inner realm is how tough the person was when there was the change of meaning. When suddenly, I find it that it's kind of strange. We as human beings, like when a young child's toy goes missing, the child cries, or somebody loses something like an object, they cry. But when we go to sleep, in deep sleep, there is no one, where there's no one who can lose anything or find anything, and we wake up, we don't even acknowledge that. We're like, yeah, I was just sleeping. It's like that was no, 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 no. That was not existing as a conscious creature. You see the fascination of it? Life is very, very multidimensional, but its dimensions aren't like the colors in a rainbow. It's not like that kind of multidimensionality. It's the multidimensionality of the void, of the singular, of the dualistic, and after you have duality, you can access the infinite. So you could play the games of going up the dimensions as much as you want. You could even say there's like 12 dimensions, 14, 15, whatever. You can choose, but the point is that after you have duality, then there is the witness of duality is an infinite creative ability. That means any system that you can understand its chaos and order, creative, you can completely see the whole chaos and order apply differently. You're seeing something more out of the picture. Decency doesn't mean victory. Decency means the emotional passage of the moment has found to be more important. It's like there's a reason. For example, neurologists, they go home and they don't see their wife and kids as just neurons. They see a human dimension. It's our humanity where really love exists and is relevant. Any time we go beyond being an individual, the most poetic thing that could be said about love is that you are it. You are it. There's no lover. It's just pure being. Because the idea of pure can be applied to anything. You can look at a pure person, you could look at a pure cloth, you could look at a, pure silk, pure, like a pure soul, a pure thought, a pure body, a pure mind, But what is that notion of the pure? It is the instantaneous. I feel if there's divinity, it's instantaneous. That means there could totally be a world happening that's happening faster than the speed of light, but we can't see it. Can you imagine? Can you imagine like the universe is filled with aliens, but we can't see it? Like how ridiculous would that? Like even on this planet, there could be so many aliens, but we can't see them. Who said the alien is going to be physical? Isn't that a good question to ask? I think, and that this is really taking the philosophers of the modern era towards the great question: what does it really mean to be an integrative collective movement? Because that question is always of wonder, you know? And there's different approaches. That's the cool thing about life. Everybody is dealt their own hand, and the good thing is one of the cards, imagine like Texas Hold'em, one of the cards you know, one of the cards you don't know. And so nobody knows their potential, nobody knows their future. And when I say nobody knows, because it's something that the only way you know it is when you're actually going into it or when you're building it. Every dimension has its joys. Every dimension. There is a urge within, I find, all human beings. I think it's just develops in human beings ever since psychology, like their psychology since youth. I think it's something that's just very in the conditioning of how a child becomes an individual in the world. It's something in that sense where, how would I say it? Every human being, think of it this way again, this idea of they have an outer realm and inner realm. Now imagine in their inner realm throughout the day there is prototypes, there is models, blueprints of expression and probabilities of behavior emerging. Now you can say a person who walks, for let's say a person's walking in a I don't know, you're walking in a park and let's say the circus is right beside you. And so you're looking at the different, circus acts while you're walking, you know. I just want to share this idea that we, throughout the day, we are accumulating momentum and stress from throughout the day. What I mean by that is like there's certain pressure coming to the entity that's walking throughout the day, like when they wake up from the morning till they sleep. It's a series, it's a sequence of events, correct? So in those events that the human being is living, they can't express in all moments. It's impossible. It's impossible to 24/7 express, you know? So the human being is harboring all this inner urge to express itself, and throughout the day may not find release points. And for example, the way society is designed, it's for women, it's easy, much more easier for them to have emotional release points throughout the day, you know. But when you look at, for example, men, they have to be the walls of the, you know, of, you know, the house of humanity. That's the thing. It's like there was, I noticed this idea, and I'm like, oh my God, could it really be the case that modern society has descended in its insight, descended compared to the ancients? Because in ancient times there was no, there wasn't, I don't want to say there wasn't, but I want to say it was as if there was the archetype of man and there was the archetype of woman, and a lot of history is not recorded, by the way. But its potentials are there. So you can say instead of the man, I mean, Carl Jung spoke about the anima and the animus, which I'll bring up later, but the notion is that instead of man becoming like woman and woman becoming like man, it was as if man helps woman become the greater woman, and the woman helps the man become the greater man. And this is simply a design, it's a blueprint. What I mean by this is that you can live in the world where you are, it's as if every person, of course the candle melts for everybody, but but it's like what you do with the light. What you do with the light in your eyes. I'm just saying simply this notion, guys, that Carl Jung was saying, it's like if you are a person who's never had a sister, and if you were to imagine what it's like to have a sister, that would be, you can say, a sort of indirect confrontation of, if you were a man, it would be the anima. If you were a woman, it would be the animus. If, for example, it would be the reverse, the notion of the, you would see it that way. So there was a sort of unification between the forces, because rather than the forces trying to battle to equalize, there was more a sort of lift up. It was as if like victory in victory, there was more like You know, there's a victory where it's just like one person wins, and then there's a victory where the species advance to the next level, and you get to see what that looks like. Decency is key. Decency means you were able to not backhand your inner child. You know, I was thinking of going into a quote tunnel, but before I do, I wanted to say something about decency that also emerges in style, and I understood this through writing. I've had so many unique experiences with writing that I can't, like, I should dedicate a whole episode, I think, to it. But the notion is that when I started writing, it's as if, of course, the person's mind, the person has been thinking from day one. Like, you could think of as if your creativity is happening all the time. You're just not conscious of it. When your eyes open, you get enlightened. When the eyes of the world opened, flawless victory. The ultimate essence of humanity. It got close to its greatness. Regardless, because you can say no species, like Salvador Dali says, do not fear perfection, you will never reach it. So we can attempt to, like right now, you can even say the purpose of life is to continue humanity, but we'll see there is no perfection. So what would that mean? What would that mean to the value of life? Is it just nature's performance and then you must attend to it as just present in the moment and just go by the moment? Or is it something where you got to look back and wonder what could have been built here, you know, before the wind blows you away? So reality is phenomenal. Its depth can only be accessed, and there's something cool that I've realized. When you reduce things to a design level, its characterhood disconnects. The characterhood disconnects. So that means when you think of people as atoms, it's as if no person is good or bad. How could the atoms be good or bad? You know? They could be negatively charged, positively charged particles in that. But I'm saying but I'm saying like it's like, how could atoms be good or bad? How could matter be right or wrong? How could stuff be anything other than what it's being? You know? So you see, it's like on some level it could totally be meaningless, but on some level it could have a story, a meaning, and emotions can arise. And so the human being must seek a fortune beyond objects and subjects. I'm telling you, there is a treasure here. But strangely, the treasure is not something that is held. It's something that's holding you. It is your whole moment before it was fragmented. Guys, I was so close to saying fermented, and I was like, yo. It's like, okay, you know, just fragmented, I mean, as in broken. That means it's true. Events in life can happen that can break people's psychology. I've had moments happen in my life where I ran into the moment with some sort of energy and hope, and I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be possible. And then I went, and instantly I was dismissed, and I was too naive to even have persistence then. So it was a sort of running with energy only to realize you didn't have the strength to carry it. This is why I'm telling you, a human being can say any story at the end of the moment it comes to the beginning of your experiences. If you care about life, you'll have a fascinating intelligence. Why? Because life is intelligence. That means little did everybody know when the Dalai Lama told all the children, born in the 1990s to be compassionate. He was saying the end result of an advanced civilization, a civilization so capable that it doesn't need to be violent. It's just playful. You see, there's this thing they did with psychology of rats. They studied the psychology of rats, and what they found was that when you get like this bigger rat and this smaller rat, and when they're like in rats, when you put them in like an isolated chamber or something, the rats play games. They wrestle. Now, usually the bigger rat wins. Now, when the bigger rat wins, if the bigger rat keeps winning, the smaller rat stops playing. So the bigger rat loses on purpose sometimes. And so it's just to keep the game going. And so I was like, okay, so what's the point of like these poor rats being out of their natural environment, and really like I don't even know if the natural environment of rats is natural. The world is a strange place in 2020. But the cool thing is it's going to even be stranger in the years to come. So guys, I think now is a good time to go into the quote tunnel. And if you don't know what a quote tunnel is, you'll figure out by me just sharing it in a couple seconds. uh, just hang on there, folks. Okay, there we go. In this quote tunnel, I want to look into the theme of decency. Decency is the most decent thing you could do. Sorry guys, I'm in a more playful vibe today. Okay, there we go. Decency quotes, 25 decency quotes. Willa Cather. The test of one's decency is how much of a fight one can put up after one has stopped caring, and after one has found out that one can never please the people they wanted to please. Marcus Tullius Cicero. Virtue and decency are so nearly related that it is difficult to separate them from each other but in our imagination. Raja Krishnamurthy, he says, when the norm is decency, other virtues can thrive. Integrity, honesty, compassion, kindness, and trust. Christopher Hitchens, human decency is not derived from religion, it precedes it. And it's not just religion. Human decency is not derived from ideology. It's derived from our actual experiential sensitivity to what's alive in the moment, what's real there. You know, think of a civilization where it's as if this notion where we globalize the idea of kings and queens. And this may sound like this is what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's a choice of how you walk in this world. And it's a choice about your ultimate fear in this life. If you choose the royal path, poetically speaking, it means you are responsible for your world. That means it's like there's a royalty that's like for kings, and there's a mystical royalty which is the avatars of knowledge, the collective beings in Vedic thought. Francois de la Rochefoucauld. Decency is the least of all laws, but yet it is the law which is most strictly observed. Kiran Bedi. Ethics, decency, and morality are the real soldiers. Yeah. I would say ethics would be tolerance, decency would be your honesty, and morality would be how much you cared for the better option. Abdulaziz Henry Musa. Decency is judged by our actions, not by our words. George Bernard Shaw. Decency cannot be discussed without indecency. There's a story, guys, about this Persian poet, which I can't remember his name. I think maybe it was Ibn Sina. Or Sadi, I don't know. But the quote was, they asked this guy who was incredibly polite, this Sufi poet back in the day was very polite. And they asked him, how are you so polite? Like how, you know? And the guy says, it's very easy. I learned from the rude. I did the opposite. This genius looked at what didn't work and did the opposite, and people came and said, what? Mahatma Gandhi. Decency requires that when a program is approved by the majority, all should carry it out faithfully. I think he means democracy. But decency and democracy hopefully should be synonymous in this model. Henry, just Henri, just some dude named Henry. There are those. I think it was the person who was like, he's like, hey man, I want to get a quote in here. The person who made this website I'm reading from. He's like, all right. He's like, it's like his name's Henry. He's like, let me just put it with the I. It's like no one will ever know. He says there are those without decency who must be fought without hesitation, without pity. Okay, it's like, calm down there, Henry. Moliere, Moliere.
There's a sort of decency among the dead, a remarkable discretion. You never find them making any complaint against the doctor who killed them. Jesus Christ, where are these quotes going? Joseph Marie, decency renders all things tolerable. Yeah, because honestly, the whole thing about forgiveness, like anywhere that idea is around, it's how much you care about your own decency, how much you feel your mind deserves peace. This is a strange concept because usually we're like, whatever, we want to be tough, we want to be tough and intense, show this kind of like Iron Man suit that never breaks to the world. But but there's something here where in decency, the vulnerable dimensions of you, it's like, think of the mind, just like we have two brain hemispheres. There is the notion of, for example, what's the goddess and the god, you know. I'm just trying to say that there's these two edges to the extremes. There's these two intensities at the edges of every spectrum, you know. Anyways, let's go back to the quote tunnel. Cory Booker. Small acts of decency ripple in ways we could never imagine. May Sarton. One must think like a hero to behave like a merely decent human being. Robert A. Heinlein. Jesus Christ. Robert says decency is not news. It is buried in the obituaries, but it is a force stronger than crime. Justice consists of doing no one injury, a decency in giving no one offense. Cicero says this. Raja Krishnamurti. In some ways, decency is a hazy concept. We know it when we see it. Quentin Crisp. Decency must be an even more exhausting state to maintain than its opposite. Those who succeed seem to need a stupefying amount of sleep. Wentworth, who doesn't need sleep in this modern world of ours, Wentworth Dillon, want of decency is want of sense. Arthur McKeon, silence is not weakness and decency is not pride. Mahatma Gandhi, decency and tolerance. To be of any value must be capable of withstanding the severest strain. Aldous Huxley, the thin and precious crust of decency is all that separates any civilization, however impressive, from the hell of anarchy or systematic tyranny which lie in wait beneath the surface. Wow. Exactly. I'm gonna copy paste this code in the chat section, guys. This code is pretty much like what I was trying to get to with my talk. Look at Aldous Huxley ahead of his time. By the way, guys, treat the chat section as the School of Athens 2.0. You can, in a philosophical manner, evoke any idea. Samuel R. Delany. There is a sense of decency that's like a barometer to a man's or a country's health. Yeah, decency, you know what decency really comes down to? It means when you honestly see something, you don't treat it as something else. It means you honor the nature of the world that was here much longer than you have been here. For me, the idea of intelligence, whether we see it through the archetypal format of extraterrestrials, whether we see it in the archetypal format of gods, and angels, whether we see it in the archetypal format of future travelers or whatnot, or the multidimensional paradigm in that way, it's just this idea that before your eyes opened, the world was in the middle of making its masterpiece. And so you will make your masterpiece when you find the true master, peace. That is the ultimate. There's no greater teacher than realizing you have to let go of the weapon, and that is the only way the weight of the world can fall. If you just drop the artificial and trust your eyes. Because you don't see creatures in nature doubting themselves. You don't see a lion being like, I don't feel like roaring today. The lion doesn't care. And the hyena going and challenging the lion doesn't even care either. And so there's many, many types of realms. The gazelle cares. I mean, but the ability of human beings is to unleash the greatest symphony of calibrated human action, where it's as if human beings, like drops, become a river of advanced movement, where the civilization is declared advanced and we are running towards it, rather than us feeling that, oh, hopelessness, what do we do? What can you do when you stare at the void? Little is this, like seldom is this said. But when you get to the void, the only thing you can do is create. That is the joy of potential in any format of life. Our eyes are not just the eyes we see in the mirror. It is the whole moment instantaneously processed as being, just how we're being. It's like the young child was introduced to the notion of God and looked at the clouds and are like, God, you seeing this? I'm being a person right now. Aeschylus says God's most lordly gift to man is decency of mind. That is really the inner strength, guys. That means I'm telling you that people who I have seen, I consider to be their hearts to be way open than mine. I've at least been blessed to see, those who it was okay for them, it was very easy for them to renounce everything. For me, there was a strange feeling when in 2015, I felt I reached a point where it was strange. It was as if like I felt I had reached the door of my conception. And I felt I was very close to leaving that door, and then there was this feeling as if the work is not complete. The great work. The work of your breath in the body that is living for the civilization that has one chance to go beyond its limit. Michael de Montaigne, decency not to dare to do that in public which it is decent enough to do in private. Okay, that's an incredible, I would say, approach to the idea of decency. That you just are mindful. I think the best way the person can be decent is only through mindfulness. You gotta notice like there's other human beings with unknown inner realms. When you realize every creature deserves the eyes that they're looking at the world, all you can do is salute evolution that has come this far. Charles Pinnett Duckloss Decency is not defined by statute, but the laws of instinct are stronger. Rita Mae Brown, morals are private, decency is public. Mike Klepper, decency is such a rare thing in this world and it can only be repaid with loyalty. Barack Obama, acts of sacrifice and decency without regard to what's in it for you create ripple effects. Ones that lift up families and communities, that spread up opportunity and boost our economy. You know, the issue is when the overall design has holes in it. The hope has to come from an overall analysis of the system. But what Barack Obama is saying there is that it's like everything takes energy to do. So sacrifice is where your attention goes, where your energy is, what your energy is used for, where it goes, you know. E.J. Dion, common decency is a core part of who people are. Very true. Margaret Yorsenar, morals are a matter of private agreement. Decency is of public concern. And guys, oh my God, how many quotes are there here? Oh no, okay, we're reaching the end. No? Yeah, okay. George Bernard Shaw, decency is indecency's conspiracy of silence. Wow. Don't overestimate the decency of the human race. Henry Louis Mencken. I'm pretty sure like one of his friends was like, buddy, don't you mean underestimate? Tom Steyer. Breaking of norms and disregard for decency have huge long-term costs. And here's the thing. The immediate cost of not being decent is reducing the level of human intelligence on this planet. By not abiding by your natural being, if I can say that. Not that that's too much of a kind of linear idea, but I'm just saying like there's a reason we have emotions. There's a reason thoughts come and go. There's a reason that the world feels like an event. There's a reason the Zen master Matsuo Basho, he said the journey itself is my home. That means you who are suffering because you are trying to get to the end. What end? When every moment lives and dies, from the known to the unknown, you know, back to the known. This endless loop. I could tell you there was a time I looked at this and it's like, you're telling me I've been endlessly in this life, like on, off, on, off. I'm like, what is this? Every time I sleep, it's like a gap. And it's like thinking, like imagine in the future, people don't need to sleep anymore. There's some technology that compensates for the lack of it. We would suddenly see, we would be creatures of endless, of immortal wonder. The wonder, like the question an immortal being would have. Because the question an immortal being would have would be design oriented. Because that's the point of immortality. The design continues endlessly. But the eternity was different than immortality because eternity meant it was beyond time. As Plato says, time is the moving image of eternity. Susan Anderson from The Matrix. No, I'm joking. She says, if you can't say anything nice, at least have the decency to be vague. I think that's not decent to be vague. I think if you can't be nice, be honest. That means it's like you stand the ground of the honest emotion you have, but also consider the world as comrades on the same battlefield. That means the last thing humanity's forces to, as we march into the unknown, our true challenge. That means I don't consider any human being to be an enemy. if there is an enemy, if I was to consider an enemy, it would be such a macrocosmic question. And it would be just such an unknown factor. Like for me, it would be like if someone said, if you had to think of an enemy, what would you think? I would probably think in the future we should prepare if an advanced alien civilization invaded, you know? Like I'm like this thought. Like some people are looking at the zombie apocalypse, and I'm like, okay, all right. But then I was like, what if we were such an advanced civilization that it was as if we were so incredible in our detail and precision and efficiency that in some sense, like, we could stand on the same platform as the higher realms, if they are, if they are accessible. Because potential can have any design. It's like, here's the funny thing. It's like I could say this cup can be become a Russian doll, and some person's gonna be like, "What do you mean, Mr.Within? How could this cup become a Russian doll?" And I'm like, imagine somehow, okay, the atoms from this cup. When we're calling this a cup, that means we're considering all those atoms to be the cup. So imagine an atom from this cup over a long period of time finds itself in a Russian doll or something, like finds itself on, like, the particle throughout time, like that. Because the thing is, atoms don't die, but people do. How messed up is it? Atoms are more immortal and eternal than us, That's the case. The secular viewpoint sees matter as immortal, and the mystical viewpoint sees space as eternal. That means eternity cannot be taught. You just have to wonder how you're temporary. And you have to not take this in a physical sense. I'm speaking to neo-philosophers here. I hope so. But the thing is that we have discretion. We have, it's like whatever you hear from this world, including whatever I say, like, don't forget, this world requires your attention to function. That means, like, people are responsible for their most immediate experience. That means right now we haven't connected our heads to compete in computers to have, like, a bunch of people being conscious in one simulation of an experience. Because I feel the moment we connect all the heads of human beings to computers, for example, imagine this is a parallel potential of what could happen on Earth. We're like, yo, man, it's much cooler when your brain's connected to the internet, you know? So imagine it's like we reach that time. So it would be a situation where what would that mean? That would mean as you are simultaneously existing, your brain is in the body, but the brain's expression is not limited in the body. So it would mean that we would be as if like 8 billion minds infused. It would be like 8 billion drops merged. And imagine all the information. It would be a sea of information where the wave would be the resolution. So this may sound strange, but some people, it's like, where is there's this notion that atoms make up the body, and there's this notion that it's like collective. It may sound strange. This is just entertain the idea playfully. It's like the person is made of gods. There was this saying, it's as if the god is listening from the wall of the room or something. I think it was India. In India, there was a saying like that. But anyways, the point is, when you drive a vehicle, you are the soul of that vehicle. And in a deeper analysis of the human condition, we're wondering if consciousness is the driver of the conditional elemental biological being. That means it's very strange. For me, even like this may sound like a bit surreal to some people, maybe not. But for me, I looked at my body and I looked at my hands and I'm like, why this design?